Welcome to Today in the Hypothesis. Usually when we talk about a computer crashing, it's pretty obvious.
Oh, yeah.
The screen goes blue or a big error message pops up,
Right.
and you know exactly what failed, and you can just see it happening right in front of you.
Yeah, it's a visible glitch. It's a clear malfunction that basically demands your attention immediately, like a car engine smoking on the highway.
Exactly.
You know something is broken,
Yeah.
and you just, you have to pull over and deal with it.
But then you get those insidious background processes.
Oh, man, yeah.
Where the computer looks completely fine on the outside, like the screen is on, the keyboard is plugged in, but it's entirely unresponsive.
It's just frozen?
Yeah, the hardware is running, the fans are whirring, but the system is completely frozen. You hit Control-Alt-Delete and nothing. You click the mouse, nothing.
Right. It's running, but nobody is actually at the controls.
Yeah.
It is basically the absolute definition of a silent system failure. The machine is technically on, but its core functions have completely detached from the inputs it's receiving.
And that silent system failure is exactly what we are exploring today, but inside the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is to explore this truly fascinating multidisciplinary hypothesis. It's proposed by a researcher named Victor H. Sertouche.
Right.
And it uncovers this startling dynamic. We are looking into how a child is perfectly normal developmental milestones, like a toddler just saying no or an argument with a spouse, can literally cause a parent's brain to shut down.
Yeah, it's intense.
We are exploring the hidden triggers of parental dissociation, and I want to frame this right out of the gate for anyone listening to this deep dive.
Please do.
Even if you are not a parent, understanding how human brains react to perceived interpersonal threats. It fundamentally changes how we view every single relationship in our life.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the core mechanics of human connection, survival, and what happens when those two things kind of come into conflict. So let's start with the foundation. The overarching idea here is that parental dissociation is not just some static personality trait.
Yeah.
It's this very dynamic psychobiological defense system.
Exactly. I think culturally, we tend to view dissociation, which is, a state of feeling detached from reality or your body or your emotions.
Right.
We view it as this enduring flaw in someone's personality. We say someone is sort of spaced out or cold or emotionally detached.
Right, like it's just who they are.
Exactly. But this hypothesis reframes it entirely. It is a highly active defense system. And what's crucial is that it is actively triggered by two main interpersonal threats within the home.
Sure.
Well, the first is a growing child asserting their autonomy and defiance. And the second is an intimate partner challenging the parent.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it sounds like a psychological time bomb. It's as if the parent unresolved trauma is a buried landmine, and the child simply taking a normal, developmental step forward is what steps on the pressure plate. It's not that the child is doing anything malicious. They're just walking across the lawn of their own development.
What's fascinating here is how structural dissociation theory perfectly explains that exact landmine dynamic.
Okay.
To really grasp this, we have to look back at the work of Pierre Janet in the late 19th century.
Right, the early days of this stuff.
Yeah, which was later expanded by Onno van der Hart. They proposed that severe trauma literally splits a person's personality into distinct systems to help them survive.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, so you have what they call the apparently normal parts, or ANPs, and the emotional parts, or EPs.
Okay, let's ground that in reality. So the ANP, the apparently normal part, that's the part of you making breakfast, driving to work, paying the bills.
Making sure the kids' shoes are tied.
Right, it's the functional adult.
Precisely. The ANP does the daily caregiving and sort of interfaces with the world.
Okay.
But the EPs, those emotional parts, they're compartmentalized and locked away in the basement of the psyche. They hold all the trauma, the vehement emotions, the sensory fragments, and the primal defense responses from the original abuse or neglect that the parents suffered in their own childhood.
So they're just carrying all that weight in the background.
Exactly. Now, in a healthy family system, when a child pushes boundaries to establish independence, which they absolutely must do to become an individual,
Right.
parents naturally grant them that autonomy.
Right. They might get annoyed that the 3-year-old is refusing to put on their coat, but they don't view it as an existential threat.
No.
They understand it's just a 3-year-old figuring out that they have free will.
Exactly. It helps the child build a stable self-concept. But in a vulnerable system where the parent has these locked-away EPs, they cannot tolerate that boundary pushing.
Because it threatens the compartmentalization.
Yes. To keep the trauma locked in the basement, the parent relies on psychological control to maintain utter stability in the home.
Oh, I see.
They try to manipulate the child's thoughts or feelings to enforce strict compliance. Because when the child naturally resists that control, the parent feels an acute, profound sense of powerlessness.
And powerlessness is the primary affective component of their original childhood trauma.
You nailed it.
So the child just saying no or refusing to conform to this protective, tightly controlled bubble the parent has built, that acts as a direct trigger.
Yes.
The parent's brain doesn't just see a stubborn toddler, it feels the exact same helplessness it felt 30 years ago when the parent was being abused.
Yeah, and this leads to a phenomenon clinicians call the age-matching stimulus.
Age-matching stimulus.
Right.
Yeah.
This is where the mechanics of trauma become incredibly, almost tragically precise.
How so?
When a growing child reaches the exact age at which the parent originally experienced their severe abuse or neglect, their physical presence, their height, their voice, and their emotional expressions mirror the parent's traumatized younger self.
Oh, wow. So if a parent was severely neglected or abused at age 4, the moment their own child turns 4, the child basically becomes a walking, talking trigger.
Exactly. It triggers a time distortion phenomenon. The ANP can no longer hold the barrier against the EP. The past violently invades the present.
That's terrifying.
It really is.
Yeah.
The parent is looking at their child, but on a neurobiological level, they are experiencing their own historical trauma.
There is a phrase that developmental psychologists use for this that I've always found incredibly evocative.
Oh, the Freiberg one.
Yeah, Selma Freiberg's Ghosts in the Nursery.
Yes.
It's such a haunting, poetic phrase for something so deeply clinical.
It really is, and it remains a landmark framework in developmental theory. Freiberg illustrated how unremembered, unintegrated childhood terror returns to haunt the parent-child relationship.
Right.
When an infant cries inconsolably or a toddler throws a massive tantrum, it doesn't just stress the parent out in a normal way. It represents the parent's own repressed feelings of fear and abandonment from their early life.
The ghosts literally invade the nursery.
Exactly. And when that happens, the parent's mind just hits the eject button to escape that internal resurgence of suffering. Because they can't physically run away from their own baby.
Right. You can't just leave a baby.
So they detach mentally. Or they might even pathologically identify with their original aggressor and become terrifying to the child.
Wow.
It's a vertical trigger, right? It's moving straight down through the generations from parent to child.
But we know this threat doesn't just come from below. It comes horizontally, too.
It does.
Which naturally forces us to ask, what happens when the threat isn't a helpless child, but an equal adult?
Right. That shifts our focus from the parent-child dynamic to the adult battlefield of intimate partner conflict.
Okay.
Clinically, this is recognized in the DSM-5 under the category child affected by parental relationship distress.
Or KPRD.
KPRD, yes.
Yeah.
It acknowledges that when partners engage in severe chronic conflict or emotional abuse, it doesn't just stay between the adults, it destabilizes the entire family structure.
Okay, I have to pause and push back on this a little bit because I think a lot of people listening might be snagging on this exact point.
Sure.
I completely get why a crying baby or a defiant toddler might trigger a parent's unresolved childhood memories. The baby is objectively helpless. The parent was helpless when they were abused. And there's that intense age-matching stimulus you just talked about.
Right.
It makes sense, but why would an argument with an adult spouse trigger that same primal dissociation?
Yeah.
You're an adult. Your spouse is an adult. If someone is screaming at you or invalidating you, aren't adults fundamentally better equipped to just walk out the door and leave the argument?
See, it is entirely logical to assume that an adult has the agency to just walk away.
Right.
But that assumption ignores the brutal reality of what we call structural entrapment.
Structural entrapment.
Yeah. And this is where betrayal trauma theory becomes essential to understand. Betrayal trauma occurs when you are profoundly threatened by someone you depend on for your physical, emotional, or financial survival.
Oh, I see.
Think about it. In childhood, if your caregiver abuses you, you cannot leave. You will starve.
Right. You are literally trapped by biology and economics.
In adulthood, when a traumatized parent is confronted by a hostile, controlling, or invalidating spouse, they often find themselves in a remarkably similar trap. They cannot just walk out the door.
Because of the mortgage, the joint bank accounts, the social shame of divorce.
The fear of losing custody of the kids.
Wow. Yeah.
Exactly. The entrapment is structural. When the individual's nervous system registers that they are under attack, but they absolutely cannot flee due to those structural ties, it reaches back into its old playbook.
It reverts to early betrayal dynamics?
Yes, this is incredibly heavy, but the current spouse essentially becomes a psychological proxy for the original childhood abuser.
That is terrifying. You're saying the brain, in its panic, basically overlays the emotional imprint of a childhood abuser onto the face of the person they married?
That's exactly what's happening.
How on earth does a person navigate that while still living in the same house?
Well, to survive the threat, while maintaining the necessary attachment bond,
Hmm.
because again, they still depend on this spouse for their livelihood or to keep the family intact.
Right.
The brain deploys dissociation as an adaptive information blocking mechanism.
Mm.
It essentially blinds itself to the betrayal so the person can continue to function in the household.
It mutes the threat so you can stay in the house and keep making dinner.
Right.
But that has to take a massive toll on the entire family dynamic. The boundaries start to completely erode, don't they?
They collapse entirely. The traumatized parent, unable to tolerate the marital tension and dissociated from their own protective instincts, often tries to triangulate the child.
Meaning they drag the kid into the middle of the adult fight?
Yes. They draw the child into the adult conflict to either distract from the tension or they recruit the child as an emotional ally against the spouse.
That's so damaging.
It is. But here is where the system completely breaks down. When the child naturally resists carrying that immense adult burden, or when the partner turns around and challenges the parent for dragging the child into it, the parent is now completely surrounded.
Oh, man.
They're facing threats from both directions.
The horizontal threat from the angry spouse and the vertical threat from the overwhelmed child.
At that point, the parent's reflective functioning completely collapses.
What is reflective functioning exactly?
Reflective functioning is our crucial ability to understand our own mental states and the mental states of others.
Okay.
To know that I am stressed, my spouse is angry, and my child is scared. But we are all separate people.
Got it.
When that fails, the parent can no longer differentiate between the present stressor in the kitchen and the past trauma from 30 years ago. The timeline shatters.
Wow.
They drop into a severe dissociative state. Profound emotional withdrawal, staring blankly, psychological absence.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we are talking about this in psychological terms. Timeline shattering, trauma in the basement.
Yeah.
But what is actually happening inside the meat and hardware of the body when this psychological collapse occurs?
Right.
The answer lies in the neurobiology of the brain. So instead of the brain-ERS engine revving into the red zone, which is the classic fight-or-flight response we always hear about,
Exactly.
dissociation is like a massive biological circuit breaker tripping.
That's a great way to put it.
The medial prefrontal cortex just cuts the power to the emotional centers to prevent an electrical fire, leaving the person physically in the room but psychologically in the dark.
That circuit breaker analogy is perfectly aligned with the latest neuroimaging research, specifically Ruth Lanius's corticolimbic inhibition model.
Okay, tell me about that.
Lanius did some groundbreaking work differentiating between two completely distinct modes of emotional dysregulation in trauma survivors.
The first one being?
The first mode is what she calls undermodulation. This is your classic hyperarousal.
Mm.
In this state, the prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of the brain, fails to inhibit the limbic system, so the amygdala, the fear center, goes into absolute overdrive.
The engine revving into the red zone?
Right.
This is the intrusive memories, the panic attacks, the sudden bursts of rage. It's the response we are most familiar with when we see trauma depicted in movies or TV.
Yeah, it's loud, it's visible, it's chaotic. But the second mode is overmodulation, and this is the biological root of dissociation.
Overmodulation.
Yes. In an overmodulated state, there is a massive spike in top-down inhibition. The medial prefrontal cortex fires intensively to clamp down on the subcortical emotional processing. It hyper-inhibits the amygdala.
Wait, before we move on, let's make sure that's crystal clear. Hyperinhibition means the logical brain is essentially suffocating the fear center.
Yes. It neutralizes the overwhelming distress by literally severing the conscious emotional connection. It builds a chemical wall.
So the person isn't ignoring their spouse or their child. It's not a behavioral choice.
No, not at all.
It's not even a failure of the brain. It's the brain aggressively protecting itself by shutting down the emotional network so the system doesn't burn to the ground.
Exactly. It is a highly successful survival strategy in the moment, even if it's devastating long-term.
Right.
And this maps perfectly onto Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, which is crucial for understanding how this plays out in the nervous system. The autonomic nervous system actually operates on a three-tiered evolutionary hierarchy.
Okay, let's walk through these tiers.
The highest, most evolved level is the ventral vagal system. This is our state of social engagement.
Okay.
When you are safe, you are in ventral vagal. You can communicate, you have emotional attunement, you can reason with your spouse or soothe your child.
But when that fails, say during a heated, terrifying argument where you feel trapped,
Right. Then we drop down a level to the second tier, the sympathetic nervous system.
and that's our old friend. Fight or flight. Adrenaline pumps, heart rate spikes. You get ready to either punch the threat or run out the front door.
Exactly. But we go back to that concept of structural entrapment.
Right. The mortgage, the kids.
If fighting back will get you physically hurt or divorced and bankrupt, and fleeing is impossible because you have nowhere to go and kids in the house, what happens?
You can't fight and you can't run.
So the nervous system bypasses those active sympathetic defenses entirely. It realizes they are useless.
Oh, wow.
And it drops down to the most primitive reptilian third tier, the dorsal vagal complex.
The third tier.
This is profound parasympathetic shutdown. It induces what we call bradycardia.
Let's translate that. Bradycardia means what exactly?
It means a significant rapid lowering of the heart rate. Your blood pressure drops, your muscle tone reduces, and you experience extreme psychological detachment.
The body is essentially playing dead to survive a predator it cannot defeat.
Yes.
There's a model that expands on this physical drop, the evolutionary defense cascade by Maggie Schauer and Thomas Elbert.
Yes.
And they break this descent into distinct sequential stages, don't they?
We do, and it really highlights how ancient this reflex is. They conceptualize the response to an inescapable threat through a 6-stage sequence: freeze, flight, fight, fright, flag, and faint.
Freeze, flight, fight, we know those. But let's look at those last three because that's where the dissociation lives. Fright, flag, and faint.
Exactly. When intense family arguments act as psychological analogs to predator entrapment, the traumatized parent's nervous system drops straight into these later parasympathetic stages.
Okay.
The fourth stage, fright, is also known as tonic immobility.
What does that look like in a living room?
It looks like muscle rigidity while remaining wide awake and alert. It's the literal deer in headlights.
Right.
The person might be sitting on the couch, completely stiff, staring wide-eyed, unable to speak or move, while their spouse is yelling at them.
They are frozen stiff, and then it goes deeper to the fifth stage, which is flag.
Flag is flaccid immobility. The rigidity goes away, and the body basically goes limp.
Just totally slack.
Yeah. It is characterized by profound emotional numbing, dropping physiological arousal, and sensory deferentation, which means the brain stops processing sensory input from the body.
Wow.
You might not feel physical pain, you might barely hear the yelling.
And finally, the last resort, faint.
Faint is vasovial syncope, a complete loss of consciousness due to a massive blood pressure collapse. The brain just turns off the lights entirely.
So when we see a parent who is just staring blankly at the wall while a spouse is berating them, or while a toddler is screaming on the kitchen floor, they aren't giving the silent treatment.
No.
They are ignoring them. Their nervous system has tripped the breaker and dropped them into the flag stage. They are biologically, evolutionarily surviving a predator encounter in their own home.
Exactly.
That is staggering to think about.
It completely changes how we view domestic conflict.
But this biological circuit breaker doesn't just trip in a vacuum. It's not just brain chemistry and past trauma. What's so compelling is how this ties into the world around us.
Yes.
These biological responses are heavily influenced by the societal structures and power dynamics that surround the individual every single day.
That's a vital connection to make. Biology is inextricably linked to the environment.
Right.
The sociocultural and gender dynamics of a given society actively reinforce and sometimes even require this biological shutdown.
Really?
To illustrate this, we can look at anthropological research, specifically focusing on culturally mediated idioms of distress.
Okay, so if this is a biological circuit breaker, we have to ask, does it happen to everyone, everywhere, or do different cultures handle this shutdown differently?
Right.
I know researchers looked into the work of anthropologist I.M. Lewis on the Tsar spirit possession cults in the Horn of Africa and the Middle East.
They did.
Now, I have to play the proxy for the listener here because this feels like a massive left turn.
It does sound like it.
How does a spirit possession ritual in the Middle East connect to the neurobiology of a modern parent shutting down during a fight in the suburbs?
I know it sounds wild, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually makes perfect, elegant sense.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about the structural entrapment we discussed earlier.
Right.
In highly oppressive patriarchal systems, a woman often faces acute marital distress, severe financial entrapment, and relentless domestic labor. But she has absolutely zero legal or social avenues to rebel.
She has no active fight or flight option.
None. If she directly challenges her husband, she risks severe physical punishment, social ostracization, or ruinous divorce where she loses everything, including her children.
Okay, so she is completely, utterly cornered. The sympathetic nervous system fight or flight is permanently off the table for her survival.
Exactly. So what happens? The nervous system does what it's built to do. It defaults to the parasympathetic dorsal vagal shutdown.
The flag stage.
Yes. The woman experiences physical symptoms: apathy, headaches, emotional numbing, staring into space. But in these specific cultures, that dissociative state isn't just treated as a medical pathology. It is mobilized into the czar possession.
Mobilized how?
It acts as a culturally sanctioned dissociative state. The woman enters a trance, her core identity recedes, and an alter identity, the czar spirit, takes over her body.
Okay, but if a woman is completely trapped financially and socially, how does going into a trance actually solve her problem with her husband? What does the spirit actually do?
This is the brilliant adaptive part.
Yeah.
The spirit expresses all the forbidden anger that the woman is never allowed to voice.
Oh, wow.
Through the voice of the spirit, the woman can negotiate for relief from domestic labor, demand gifts, demand better food, or complain loudly about the marriage.
And she can do all of this without facing any punishment from her husband or society because everyone agrees it is the spirit talking, not her.
Exactly. She is not responsible.
So you're telling me that a biological reflex designed to help us survive being eaten by a predator millions of years ago is the exact same mechanism making a mom stare blankly at a wall when her husband yells at her. And it's the exact same mechanism used in a spirit possession ritual to negotiate domestic rights.
Yes.
That is staggering. The culture essentially built a pressure valve around a biological reflex.
Exactly. It is the evolutionary flag response turned into a brilliant, socially recognized tool to renegotiate domestic power dynamics when direct conflict is prohibited by patriarchy.
Wow.
And we can connect this right back to modern empirical data, too, with tools like the Parent-Child Dynamics Questionnaire or the PCDQ.
How does that data map onto the modern world, then?
Well, the PCDQ studies consistently demonstrate that females who lacked agency or control over their lives during childhood are at a significantly higher risk for severe clinical dissociation in adulthood.
Okay.
When you combine historical powerlessness with modern financial dependency and unequal burdens of domestic labor, partner conflict triggers that overwhelming parasympathetic shutdown.
Financial strain restricts physical escape options just as effectively as the patriarchal laws in the czar cultures.
It's all structural entrapment. The czar possession is just a specific cultural manifestation of a universal human defense mechanism.
That is so wild.
And because these psychological phenomena are so deeply woven into the human experience, they don't just show up in clinical data or anthropological field notes.
Right.
They bleed right into our art, our movies, our books, our music.
Oh yeah, artistic media was perfectly capturing these dissociative states way before science even codified the neurobiology.
Artists are very often the most astute observers of human psychology.
Yeah.
They capture the feeling of the phenomenon before the scientists figure out the mechanics.
Yeah.
There are three incredible examples across different mediums that really prove this point, starting with cinema. Lynn Ramsey's 2011 film adaptation of We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Oh man. That movie's incredibly disturbing, and it sits with you for days.
It really does.
For those who haven't seen it, the protagonist, Eva, is dealing with a son, Kevin, who is completely hostile and defiant from the moment he is born. He rejects every single attempt she makes at parenting or connection.
Yes, and from a clinical psychoanalytic perspective, Eva exhibits a profound schizoid failure of maternal mirroring and emotional containment.
Wait, before we move on, schizoid failure of maternal mirroring is a massive mouthful of jargon.
Fair enough.
In plain English, what does that actually look like between Eva and her baby?
It means that when a baby cries, a healthy parent usually reflects back a soothing emotion. They mirror the baby, but with calm containment, showing the baby that their distress is manageable.
Right, like, oh, it's okay, I've got you.
Exactly. Eva cannot do this. Because of her own psychological fragility, when Kevin screams, she doesn't soothe. She emotionally vacuums out. She goes blank.
She dissociates.
Kevin's relentless malignant hostility constantly challenges her psychological boundaries, and she cannot contain it.
Yeah.
But the tragedy is, it's not just the child triggering her.
Right, it's the husband, too.
Concurrently, her husband, Franklin, completely invalidates her perceptions of reality. Every time she says something is wrong with Kevin, Franklin dismisses her concerns, gaslights her, and blames her for the dynamic.
So she is trapped in the crossfire. She has the vertical threat from the terrifying child and the horizontal threat from the invalidating partner.
Caught between both, Eva retreats into chronic dissociation, and Ramsey, the director, visualizes this neurobiological shutdown brilliantly through fragmented aesthetics.
Yeah, we constantly see Eva staring blankly into space.
There is a famous scene where she is pushing baby Kevin in the stroller, and he is screaming so relentlessly that she stops and stands numbly next to deafening pneumatic construction noise on the street just to drown out the sound of her infant's cries.
It is a visual and auditory representation of sensory blunting. It is corticolimbic overmodulation captured on film.
It is the precise visual language of the dorsal vagal shutdown.
I mean, we see the exact same thing in literature, going all the way back to 1892 with Charlotte Perkins Gilman's novella, The Yellow Wallpaper.
The Yellow Wallpaper is perhaps one of the most chilling, accurate case studies of partner invalidation and patriarchal entrapment driving the dissociative break ever written.
Absolutely.
The protagonist is suffering from what we would now recognize as postpartum depression, but her husband, who is a physician, enforces a paternalistic rest cure.
Let's describe that rest cure because it's horrifying.
Oh, it's awful.
He infantilizes her, dismisses every single one of her intellectual and emotional needs, forbids her from writing or working, and literally locks her in an old attic nursery with barred windows.
She is structurally trapped in the purest sense.
Yep.
She has no physical escape, and she is forbidden from asserting any intellectual or emotional autonomy.
Yeah.
Forbidden to resist, her ego systematically splits to survive the sensory deprivation and the profound invalidation. She begins hallucinating a creeping woman trapped behind the intricate pattern of the yellow wallpaper in the room.
The wallpaper becomes the physical manifestation of her entrapment.
Exactly. And by the end of the story, a complete dissociative fracture occurs. She sheds her conscious, suffering identity entirely and fully identifies as the feral woman who has finally freed herself from the wall.
Gilman showed how forced submission and intimate partner invalidation cause a total fracture of the conscious self over a century before we had the fMRI brain scans to prove it was happening in the prefrontal cortex.
The accuracy is chilling.
It really is. And then jumping forward to the realm of music, there is Pink Floyd Eyes Comfortably Numb. I find it absolutely fascinating that Roger Waters and David Gilmour unintentionally wrote what is essentially an anthem for polyvagal parasympathetic collapse.
The lyrics to Comfortably Numb are practically a clinical diagnostic criteria sheet for a severe dissociative episode.
Yeah.
The song describes seeing a distant ship smoke on the horizon and feeling like your hands feel like two balloons.
Let's map that to the biology we talked about.
Yeah.
Because hands feeling like two balloons sounds trippy, but it's actually describing a very specific neurological state, right?
Yes. It is a precise articulation of depersonalization, feeling detached from your own body, and derealization, feeling like the world around you isn't real.
Right.
Specifically, hands like two balloons describe somatosensory deferentation.
Which means?
It means your brain is actively blocking the nerve signals from your limbs from reaching your conscious awareness.
Oh, wow.
You lose the tactile sensation of your own extremities. You feel numb, floating, disconnected.
It perfectly mirrors the psychological state of a parent undergoing sensory blunting to survive overwhelming emotional pressure in the home.
It does.
The triggers across all three of these artistic mediums, the movie, the novella, the song, are identical, aren't they?
They are remarkably consistent. Whether it's Eva enduring her son and husband, the narrator of the yellow wallpaper locked in the attic, or the subject of a Pink Floyd song retreating inward.
Yeah.
The catalyst is always the same. Forced submission, invalidation from a partner, and relentless interpersonal pressure without the possibility of physical escape.
Recognizing these patterns in our biology, our culture across the world, and our art is incredibly illuminating. It connects us all.
It really does.
But it naturally brings us to the most important question for anyone listening who recognizes these patterns in their own life or their own family. What do we actually do about it in the real world?
Right.
How do we fix a psychological system that is fundamentally designed to trigger a parent's deepest, most ancient traumas?
The core takeaway from synthesizing all these different fields, neurobiology, anthropology, psychology, is that clinical interventions cannot just focus on the individual patient in isolation.
Okay.
If a parent is dissociating, if they are shutting down in the kitchen, you cannot just put that parent in a room alone, give them talk therapy, and send them back into the house.
Right.
Treatments must address the entire family system because dissociation is a biorelational dynamic. It is triggered by the environment.
What does that look like in practice? Give me an example of how you treat the system rather than just the individual.
Well, one major highly effective approach is parent-child EMDR.
EMDR.
EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a well-known trauma therapy.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
But in the parent-child protocol, instead of just treating the parent's childhood memories, the therapist targets the simultaneously activated traumatic networks of both the parent and the child together.
How does that actually work in the room?
The therapist works with the parent to process their own historical trauma while the child is present, helping the parent biologically regulate their nervous system in real time while interacting with the exact stimulus, the child, that usually triggers the shutdown.
Wow, that's intense.
It actively breaks the intergenerational transmission of trauma. The parent learns to stay in the ventral vagal state of social engagement, even when the child is being difficult.
That makes so much sense.
Another crucial intervention is deliberately enhancing the parent's reflective functioning.
Right. Helping them regain that capacity to understand mental states, to separate the past from the present.
Exactly. Therapy has to explicitly equip them to tell the difference, on a nervous system level, between their historical childhood abuser, who meant to destroy them, and their current toddler, who is just saying no to a plate of broccoli.
Right.
They have to rewire the circuit breaker so it doesn't trip at the wrong threat. And finally, systemic family therapy must directly target marital relationship distress.
Because if you don't fix the horizontal threat, the parent is still structurally trapped.
Precisely. You have to de-escalate the marital triangulation and address the TAPRD, the distress affecting the child.
Yeah.
Because if the home environment remains an acute interpersonal threat, if the spouse remains invalidating or hostile, the nervous system will do what it is designed to do.
It will shut down.
It will continue to force the parent into dissociative shutdown to survive the unbearable reality of their own home.
So what does this all mean? When we look at all of this together, this fundamentally shifts how we view therapy and healing.
It does.
Instead of treating a person like a single wilting tree and just watering its leaves and wondering why it's not getting better,
Right.
you have to examine the entire garden ecosystem. You have to test the soil quality, map out the surrounding roots that might be strangling it, and look at the climate and the weather patterns of the home itself.
Yeah.
You simply cannot fix the tree without fixing the garden.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. And this raises an important question about how we view child development itself, particularly the concept of defiance.
Right.
Understanding parental dissociation forces us to radically reframe a child's autonomy.
How so?
Culturally, we often view a child saying no or pushing boundaries as a behavioral problem to be crushed by parental authority.
Yeah, like they're just being a brat.
But it's not. It is a vital, healthy, normal developmental milestone. Our job as a society, as partners and as mental health professionals, is to ensure parents are biologically and emotionally equipped to tolerate that autonomy without triggering their historical ghosts.
We have to make the garden safe for both the tree and the sapling.
Precisely.
It is a profound shift in perspective. By recognizing these exact relational triggers, we can actually start to stabilize family systems and promote real, enduring connection across generations, rather than just treating the symptoms of a shutdown brain.
Exactly.
We can stop blaming the computer for freezing and start fixing the invisible code that's crashing it.
Beautifully said.
Well, that wraps up our exploration for today. If you found this breakdown of the hidden mechanics of human relationships as mind-blowing as we did, please make sure to subscribe to the show and share this deep dive into the hypothesis with a friend, a partner, or anyone who loves understanding why we do the things we do.
And as we close, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over based on the evolutionary mechanisms we discussed today.
Okay.
If dissociation is an evolutionary defense mechanism triggered by the perception of inescapable threat and entrapment within our intimate spaces, we have to ask ourselves, how might the hyper-connected, always-on digital nature of modern domestic life be creating new, invisible forms of entrapment?
Oh, wow.
If we are constantly surveilled by smartphones, tracked by locations, and expected to be immediately responsive to partners or work at all hours of the day and night, Are we inadvertently building environments that keep our nervous systems locked in the defense cascade, even when we are perfectly safe?
That is a lot to think about.